Hi, this is Paul Connett. Tonight I will be arguing the bad things about incineration, the dangers to health, and I will argue that incinerators shouldn't be built anywhere. There are much, much better solutions. But when I look behind me and look at the potential site for this incinerator, it's an abomination. This is a precious part of Britain. This is a beautiful part of Britain. And the whole notion that some private company is going to make a fortune burning other people's trash down here and change the whole character of this area, as I say, is an abomination. Now, a study was done in Europe which showed that a combination of recycling and composting was actually 46 times better at reducing global warming gases than incineration generating electricity. Obviously, the equation is better if the incinerator produces both electricity and heat, but you need a customer for that heat. Incineration is a waste of energy, despite the names waste to energy, thermal valorization, and all the other public relations spin that they put on this. 4 times more energy is saved by reusing, recycling, and composting the material than burning it. And there's a contact for Dr. Jeffrey Morris, who's been doing these calculations as long as I remember, 25 years. Just to give you an example, here are the common materials that are burnt. This is the amount of energy you save with recycling. This is the amount of energy you get when you produce electricity. This is the ratio. Look at this one. PET plastic, that's the plastic of plastic water bottles, pop bottles, and so on. 26 times more energy is saved by recycling these bottles than burning them. It's a crime to burn these materials as far as energy is concerned. And yet we have governments around the world subsidizing incinerators in the name of alternative energy, instead of putting that money into solar power and wind power and so on. It's not sustainable. Incineration does not challenge the overconsumption of finite resources. Every time we burn something, as I said, we have to go back to the beginning and start all over again. Incineration wastes energy, wastes the opportunity to fight global warming. In short, incineration sabotages genuine moves towards sustainability. Other arguments against incineration. I'll list them and then discuss some of them. It's a poor economic investment. For communities, oh yes, there are going to be people that will make a fortune out of stupid political decisions in this matter. They will make a fortune. The Viridors of this world will make a fortune. But it's the taxpayers who will lose a lot of money and waste a lot of economic opportunities. Very few jobs created for very large capital investment. It wastes valuable time. It's inflexible and stifles innovation. It generates a toxic ash. It doesn't get rid of landfills. It produces toxic air emissions. It's extremely unpopular with the public, as you are testimony tonight. There was a far better and sustainable alternative, which of course I should be talking about. So a poor investment. Most of the money spent on incinerators goes into complicated machinery and leaves the community. And in this case, probably the country, because the technology, when it comes, will probably be French, German, Swiss, or what have you. So most of that money spent on that equipment, it's gone from Devon and from the UK. Over half the money spent on a modern incinerator goes into air pollution control equipment. So the moment you start to burn something, then you have to put all this money into mitigating the problems that it generates. Clearly, if you don't burn it, you don't need to mitigate the problems. Incineration without massive subsidies is one of the most expensive ways of generating electricity, largely because it's such a dirty fuel. And you have two problems. You have the problem of trying to clean up the emissions, and then you have the problem of what to do with the ash once you've cleaned up the emissions. Incineration creates very few jobs. This is a modern incinerator in Brescia, Italy. I've visited a few times. It cost 300 million euros to build that thing, and it's created just 80 jobs. And incidentally, another 500 million euros of taxpayers' money has been spent on that in the name of alternative energy. So now we're up to 800 million euros to create 80 jobs. In contrast, the money spent on the alternatives goes into jobs and stays in the community. For example, in Nova Scotia, a province in Canada, after rejecting an incinerator in the next 5 years, they diverted 50% of the waste from landfills, and Halifax was up to 60%. In the process, they created 1,000 jobs in the handling, collecting, and treatment of that material, and another 2,000 jobs in the industries that were using that secondary material. So look at that. I mean, what a comparison. A huge amount of money to get 80 jobs and far, far, far less money to get 3,000 jobs. Incineration wastes valuable time. It takes about 25 years or more to pay off the massive capital investment costs involved with building an incinerator. We don't have 25 years to waste on a non-sustainable solution. Incineration stifles innovation. This is a quote from Ludwig Kramer, former head of EU waste management, on a BBC program. He says an incinerator needs to be fed for about 20 to 30 years, and in order to be economic needs an enormous input from quite a region. So for 20 to 30 years you stifle innovation, you stifle alternatives just in order to feed that monster which you build. Now it's not a coincidence that the Devon authorities, or the South Devon authorities, formed a regional authority. This is the indicator that you're going to get an incinerator. So the idea of an incinerator came first, and then second came this formation of a large authority in order to have a large catchment area to feed the incinerator. Incinerator produces a toxic ash. For every 4 tons of waste you burn, you get 1 ton of ash or more that nobody wants. 90% of that ash is what we call bottom ash, which falls through the grates, and 10% is fly ash. This is the fine particles which you hope to capture in the air pollution control devices. And remember, this part of the incinerator costs more than the rest put together. So, ash is toxic and it's difficult to get rid of. The fly ash is extremely toxic, no question about that. Toxic metals, dioxins, furans, and so on. And in many countries, they don't even bother to test it because they know it's toxic. So here is how some countries deal with it. In Germany and Switzerland, the fly ash is put into nylon bags and placed in salt mines. In Japan, some of the incinerators vitrify the ash. They make it into a glass to prevent the metals from leaching. In Denmark, beautiful, green, clean Denmark have a wonderful solution. They send all their ash to Norway. By the way, there are no European regulations on ash disposal. It's all left to individual countries. Incineration does not get rid of landfills. You still need a landfill for the toxic ash. And having today been shown the quarry and be told about the rock structure and the proximity to the stream, the beautiful precious stream there, this is preposterous too. You're going to be putting a lot of toxic metals which will leach into that stream. You also have to be concerned of the shellfish industry, because the thing about shellfish is that they take up heavy metals. And so you could be threatening a far more precious industry than the waste industry by locating an incinerator and an ash landfill in this area. Incinerators put many highly toxic and persistent substances into the air. In particular, we're concerned about toxic metals like lead, cadmium, mercury, arsenic, chromium, and so on. The thing to remember about this part of the story is that metals are elements, and you cannot destroy elements, certainly not by burning. So any of these metals that go in have to come out. The worst, of course, is that they come out into the air. The best is into the ash, in which case it's going to be in your quarry. In the burning process, and this is what shook me in 1985, we are actually capable of making the most toxic substances that we've ever been able to make in a chemical laboratory, namely the dioxins and furans, and I spent about 20-odd years studying that issue.